Can I ask you about the immigrants in Sunderland? Why did people immigrated into Sunderland?
Into the Sundarban?
Yeah.
It's the poorest of the poor who come to the Sundarbans because they have no land.
Why don't they go to big city instead?
Oh, I mean, there are people who do that also. But in cities, you become immigrant labor. There are not enough jobs. In Sundarbans, you can earn a livelihood because there is a lot of fish. So a lot of them become fishermen. A lot of them become prawn collectors. So women are primarily the prawn collectors, the men are the fishermen. But there's also an ethos. You fall in love with forests. And you also fall in love with the equality of the place. Because you're not being marked by your caste. So that's a major kind of a...
How do they know about the Sundarban?
How do you?
How do people know about the Sundarban?
It's a huge area.
How did they decide? What made you decide? From where did they?
These are always networks of, informal networks of communication. How do people know about El Dorado? How do people know about the California gold rush? How did people from China land up in California to dig for gold? And it's always a whole range of utopian imagination about a better place.
Lawrence, do we discuss something you already said now to ask for clarity or
Yeah,
wait
sure.
until
No. We can discuss that.
Because you use Sundarban as portraying as a model for equality. Am I correct to understand?
No. It's a complicated place. It's not a utopia by any stretch of imagination.
But do you use that to represent a kind of space where there is equality?
There's a different kind of a social contract. Yeah.
So you know that kind of equality in Sundarban is also found in nomadic culture like Mongolia where they share, but it did not come from a sense of the universal value kind of equality. Okay.
Yeah, not at all. Okay. Yeah. In fact, it's the opposite. That's why I'm contrasting it with the French Revolution movement. Yeah. Just equality is on the shared vulnerabilities.
It's only survivor.
Yeah.
Once they are not interested in this kind of higher form of equality.
If there's any question on the first, the narrative bit.
What does it mean on the green eye and blue eye?
These are ways of expressing your vulnerability. These are, there's always rumors are a very important form of social communication. Whether it's a rumor of a typhoon or it's the rumor of a supermarket taking over a neighborhood, or it's the rumor of NGOs building, or these World Wildlife Fund building a holiday resort. They become modes of social discourse which allow you to express a fear of what is unknown. So it's not fiction. You know that there's something, but you don't know the actual contours of it. So you give it a monstrous form. So unlike the old tigers, which you knew the old tiger, you knew how they look, you know how they sound, you know how they smell. But these are half machine, half, so they become monstrous forms of articulating your vulnerability.
さっき言うの忘れてた。なんかその外国、なんだっけ、都市の虎はなんか半分機械で、半分マシン、ハーフマシン、
Yeah, half animal.
半分動物。
I mean, you take Japanese popular culture is filled with these mutations, right? I mean, the entire manga culture is filled with cyborgs, filled with these ghost come robot, things like that.
So Japanese animation very full of anime.
Yeah.
なんだろう、サイボーグフェル、サイボーグヒロイン。
Yeah.
サイボーグヒロイン、あれ名前でみたいな。そうそうそう。でなんだろう。クリーミーマミとか。
すごいな。
窓マギとか。
If you understand English is that is a transmission of how hidden transcript, which are act of resistance, communication resistance among closed group, how this hidden transcript become a public transcript, where it create through a rumor. So these are theorized by James E. Scott in hidden transcript in the struggle of ideology and resistance.
I began with that quote of Jean Shiros Cooper about the awkward private feeling. And one of the questions I asked was, what does it mean to make public? What is the making public? The social contract is one form of making public. Art is one form of making public. Right? How do you convert in a way that awkward private feeling? And this is the hidden transcripts or the rumors are one mode in which you make public.
おかしな個人が持っている感情みたいなものっていうのを出す。このようにそういうソーシャルコンタクトとか社会契約とかパブリックっていうのを作るのかみたいな。
Should I continue? Okay, so let me now move to the second part of this workshop, which is trying to take some of these metaphors, concepts, to translate them back into the context that we all inhabit. And I want to use one Persian Urdu word and 3 Japanese words to look at this. This is a word called nishastaga. Nishastaga means a temporary unfixing of your optical horizon. So typically, as an example, you walk into the house in your room, the room in your house, and you know where your eye fixes, right? Because you know where the lamppost is, you know where the bed is, you know where your book is, you know where your pen is. Every time you walk into a new space, there is a unsettling of the horizon of vision, right? And within a matter of, let's say, sometimes a minute, sometimes an hour, sometimes days, your eye begins to settle so that you know that you can fix things in their place. The movement between these two moments and between these two forms of sensate being is what Nishastaga is trying to capture. That unsettledness of the vision as it is settling, right? It's this almost like a kind of a dilation that happens because your thing hasn't settled in. That's Nishastaga. Sorry.
出したなっていう、新聞語の言葉なんですけど、例えば自分の家だったらここに物があってっていう、そういう光景だろうっていうのが頭の中にインプットされていて、そう叱るっていうそういうふうに自分の知ってる場所とか見るんですけども、新しい場所についてはもうどこにこう目を出していいかわからない、そういう不安定感がキャスターが最初に新しい場所に不安定な気と固定された頭に固定されたイメージ、その間の感覚を表現しようとしたそういうこと。
So if the Sundarbans is a topography and a landscape of unsettledness, right? I'd like to think about how we can think about the idea of Nishastaga translating into our understanding of public spaces, of social relations, of becoming fuzzy, right? So normally the social contract is about moving from the fuzzy community into the enumerated community, the moment in which things become clear. How do we think about spaces which are overdetermined by clarity to make them into fuzzy spaces, or to make them into unsettled or nishastaga kind of spaces?
分かりきっている場所をシャスタ川っていう広場を手がかりにどうやって立ち不安定曖昧に固まったものをどうやってディスロケートするのそういったことを考えて
These are two pictures that I took from Shanghai, which are clearly between, like, you know, a space that is transforming, but hasn't yet been settled. To the point, of course, where it will be settled, right? And the story of Shanghai and the story of China is about this absolute, like, velocity of the transition that's happening. But the three Japanese terms that I want to look at, do you recognize all these three terms? Yeah. So these are not really words that are in use any longer.
This is not the Japanese.
Oh, no, it is, but it's not in use any longer. This is from medieval Japanese. And the story behind this is, and I'm relying here on the work of Tatsuro Hanada, who is relying in turn on a very important book that came out about Kugai, which is by Amino Yoshihiko. I don't know if you know any of these people. So,
あるいは公な言葉だそうがあります。公を指す言葉。
公に世界に入ってます。こんにちは。こんにちは。
Sorry to interrupt.
yeah,
So Kugai means public space.
yeah. But it's a very different idea of public from the Western notion of the public sphere. And I'll try to. So basically, Tatsuro Hanada is the one who has written a book or written an article which distinguishes between the Japanese idea of the public sphere in its historical sense and the Western idea, for example, in Habermas. Right? And I'll try to look at the distinction because it connects back to our story of the Sundarbans.
なんかそのいわゆる公共権っていう時のハーバーマスの概念による公共と、なんかこの達郎花田の言うその区外っていう日本の理想的なパブリックっていう概念が違うらしいんですよ。それを今から説明してください。
So, Hanada traces the history of the idea of Kugai back to the early 17th century, in which Kugai literally is about the public space, but the sense of publicness that it's talking about is very different from, let's say, the traditional bourgeois public sphere. And what is different about it is that it refers primarily to artisanal spaces and to trading spaces that would temporarily emerge, right? Markets, fairs, grounds, but in which the combination of commerce, everyday transaction, and ritual is what defined the space, right? So these are spaces of emergence. They were spaces that came. Now think about the Sundarbans, the emergence of islands, the disappearance of islands, right? Think about a publicness that emerges and disappears. And
So
this is
is that similar to a mela?
it's similar to a mela, very similar to a mela. In India, we have this idea of the mela, which is a fair, normally held in villages, where a cluster of villages will come together. Melas happen around market days, right? And so market days are either cattle markets or vegetable markets. And there is a festivity that emerges. In other words, it's a temporary publicness that emerges. But this publicness is very different from the publicness of public authority. Right? So it's very different from a regulated market because it is marked by this kind of ephemeral nature.
なんかその17世紀にその母達郎がこの区外っていう言葉を使い出したらしいんですけど、これっていうのはブルジョワ的な公共権の考え方とは全然違っていて。 て、むしろその毎日の、儀式のような感じですね。消えたりとか、生じたりとか、そこにそのマーケットみたいなものが生じたりとかっていうような感じらしくて、でそれっていうのはそのなんかこう規制ホリデー、もう本当規制されて作られたような祝日とか、祝祭的なものっていうのとは違う、もっと毎日の私たちの生活に即したパブリック。
The second,
予期的な。
the second word which Hanada identifies as muin, which he says in the contemporary usage, is really in some ways, so muin is a defining characteristic of the Kugai. And what it refers to him for him is the unboundedness and the unconnectedness, right? Again, in a way, the idea of when there are no clear boundaries. When there are no clear boundaries, there is no clear ownership. To give you an example, for example, from India, of how in market days and in melas, you have a predefined idea where you will be setting and selling your goods. So how does it work? There are temporary transactions that emerge. So in India, for example, there is the idea of the stone. Literally, the first person who comes and places a stone reserves that spot. So it's on two things. So now, the next week or the next month, you come a little later, that space is gone because someone else has put a stone there. So there is an unboundedness to the nature of how you occupy public spaces and how you occupy. The publicness is created by this kind of artisanal form, and it is unbounded. These are the two characteristics in a way that constitute the nature of the public that he's talking about. And I'll come to the third one.
でそのなんか無縁っていう概念自体はそのさっき言った区外っていう花田の、概念っていうのを、定義づけをするものがあって、で一つにはその境界がないということで、もう一つにはその、関係性がないということ。これは何を意味するかっていうと、つまりオーナーシップがないっていうことなんですね。要はそのブラジャー的にこう誰かがトップにいてこのパブリックがあるっていうものではない、本当に一時的なものである。
And the last word that he uses to talk about the public sphere is raku, where he says in the contemporary usage of the word raku is about pleasure or comfort or ease, right? But in the medieval usage, in relation to the idea of the kugai, raku was basically in some ways what enabled the actualizing of the kugai and the muin, because raku was a reference to a utopian space. But this is also a place in a way of a certain kind of a utopian desire, which was only possible through the suspension of fixed social identities, right? So there is an element of a playfulness associated with this idea of the utopian. Now link back again to the forest. The forest is unbounded, it is not owned, and it allows for a dislocation from your fixed identities. Yeah.
その楽っていうのは、さらにその、無縁っていうのを可能にする、条件のようなものにもなるかと思うんですけれども、今の意味で言うと楽っていうのは、喜びだとか楽しいとかそういうふうな意味がありますが、中世の時に楽っていうのはそういうふうにユートピアの理想的な欲望っていうのを、実現化するというような意味があって、でこれは何を意味するかっていうと、つまりその社会契約みたいなものを一旦保留にする、なんかこうサスペンド、なんか吊るし上げる、それがあたかもこうあるのかないのかっていうようなことにするっていうことができる。でこれっていうのが、さっきの話に戻ると森のような、境界がなかったり、ここにあるものを別の場所に置くっていうディスロケートっていうのもつながるということです。
So what I'm trying to lay out is in some ways a map, a conceptual map of possibilities of rethinking ideas of public autonomy, where the idea of the public autonomy is not based entirely on subsumption to the social contract, but based on thinking of interactive subjectivities, thinking about situations, thinking about tactics which might be used to rediscover either the wooing of contemporary life or reconstructing in a way the possibilities of the unboundedness of the forest in terms of the contemporary, right? And I want to use 2 or 3 examples as ways of thinking about this. Oh, sorry. Do you want to translate?
なんかこう理想的なその主体性っていうのは、なんか総合的な主観、インタラクティブな、自分自身であったり、シチュエーション、その状況によって変わっていくもの、あとはその、タクティクス、技術というか戦略みたいなものによって、できるみたいな、どうですかね、ということです。要はそれにそのアイディール、理想的な主体性っていうのがどういうふうに伝えるのか説明します。
Because while the Sundarbans is thousands of kilometers away from here and in the forests, and while Kugai and all come from medieval time, in other words, across time and space, as concepts, they are virtual concepts that can still be actualized, right? This is a experiment called the Magic Chair, and this was conducted by the Cyber Mohalla ensemble or the Cyber Mohalla collective that I spoke a little bit about 2 days ago. The Cyber Mohalla, for people who are not here, are a group of young writers, practitioners from 3 working class neighborhoods in Delhi, in which there are these media labs that were established by Sarai in collaboration with Ankur, which is an organization that works on alternatives to education in Delhi. And there were a whole range of various kind of experiments that the Cyber Mohalla did in their neighborhood. This was an experiment that was done in one of the Delhi neighborhoods and then taken to Ahmedabad, where Prayas is from, as a way of thinking about the post-riot situation and what could be possible as communication and as conversation, right? The reason that I want to use this example is many. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
マジックチェアっていうプロジェクトをご紹介したいと思います。その
サイドモハレというプロジェクトサライという都市論に関わっている理論家とか専門家が運営しているでアンカーという政府が指導する教育以外のことを、考える団体のコラボレーションが、デリーを中心としてスラム街の中であちこちで開催されたんですけれども、このマジックチェアのそこで実現されて、またプライスさんの出身地のアンダーバーで実験していたんですけれども、それはどういうパーティーというグジャラートというところで地中に大きいプライズがあった場所でそれ以降のことを考えるためにこのマジックチェアのコンセプトを使っています。
The magic chair for me is interesting because it speaks to one of the questions we posed in the beginning of this workshop, which is that in this neighborhood, how do you move between the 2 kind of, scales? How do you move between the 2 levels, right? And we said that there's speech and space that could potentially mediate between different levels. Now, speech is a very complex thing in the sense of, at the large scale, the Constitution gives everyone freedom of speech and expression. But who can actually exercise their free speech is a very contested question. And there, again, because you enter into the public sphere and you enter into public space with a lot of the baggage of your social identities, right? Your ability to participate in a truly kind of a open or a democratic manner becomes impossible, because your identities weigh you down, right? The magic chair is an attempt in a way to create a temporary suspension of identities. How does it work? in a number of neighborhoods in sorry.
これスケールの話、最初していた要はその例えばなんですけど国の流れとその地域とかそういうスケール感の話につながるんですけども、ある公共の場所に参加するとき、社会に参加するときにはアイデンティティっていうのがあって、あなたの疑いとか社会的地位とかそういったものがあって、そこから解放されているものの習が肩にバックも参加することになるんですけども、このケアでそれを解放しようと思います。
So in a number of neighborhoods in India, you'll find very common thing you'll find are two slabs of stones. Right? These two slabs of stones. Sometimes placed on bricks, sometimes placed on other stones. And this is a place where people sit in the neighborhood. It's a place where daily wage laborers who don't get a job for that day can also sit. Very often it will be close to a tea shop, right? So it's kind of a sitting spot. The magic chair was basically a fiction that was drawn around it. So you have the two slabs of stones, but you have this ornate crown-like, throne-like chair that's drawn around the magic chair. So there are two possibilities. There is the material condition, there is the absolutely fictitious, but the two occupy the same realm. By creating this ornate kind of the throne, what you're basically giving is a fiction of sovereignty. So the only magic of the magical property of the magic chair, it was declared, is that anyone who sits in the magical chair gets the power to be heard uninterrupted. So people were invited, therefore, to become sovereign speakers. And the fiction of allowing for this, just by virtue of having something drawn on the wall against two stones, creates a condition of speech. But this is a condition of speech that is both spatially and kind of metaphorically and verbally kind of tied together. Then I'll read out a little bit.
これインドの街中によくある石が2つあって、そこに皆さん近所の人が集まって話したりするっていう場所なんですけど、そこのただ普通の場合は石しかないところに家を建てて、でそこに座った人に関しては誰でもその人の話を聞く、そういう状況をっていうことをやっていました。
One of the participants in the Cyber Mohalla, Lakshmi, wrote a text in which he describes the background to the magic chair. And he says, this common looking square formed by the intersection of two common enough roads has been a place of gathering for a number of years now. At any point one will find anywhere between 80 to 100 people gathered here. Many people in one place where each person has enacted innumerable roles. Abhinaya. Abhinaya is a kind of a performance or a role or an actor kind of a situation in life. Roles at times of being one amongst many who constitute a gathering, and at other times the role of someone who conceives or organizes a gathering. So he's saying sometimes you're a part of the multitude, and that's the role you play. Sometimes you play the role of the person who organizes the multitude, right? So between the sovereign and the subject, between the subject and the sovereign, there's a movement that you have. As if countless characters or kirdars make up each person. Characters that sometimes offer a cooling shade, a chaya to others, and sometimes becomes a restless shadow or a parchaya that trails others. So sometimes you offer a shade to other people, sometimes you become a shadow that trails. That is how nothing ever becomes stale, and every day newer and different companions can be discovered and also sought. That is the background to the magic chair that that they wanted to think. Do you want to translate? Then I will continue.
このマジックチェアに座って話をするその人たちの立ち位置を変えたいというようなそういう思いがありました。要するに ある時はその群衆の中にその同じ一人の人がある時は群衆の中にいたり、ある時は往復を振る舞ったり、その間をね、そういうことをやっていたりとかして、まあ人の傘に